Hey everybody, we have a new sponsor and a special deal for our listeners of Karen Isn't Always Right. If you have any photos or documents that you need to scan, or videotapes, audio tapes, or film reels that you need to import, you should check out avgearguy.com. If you mention the name Karen Isn't Always Right when you order, you're going to get 5% off, and a portion of your order is going to help support the podcast Karen Isn't Always Right. All of those formats degrade over time and are sitting ducks in the case of fire or theft. Why not convert it all to digital? All your memories can be stored safely on the cloud or even a hard drive that fits in your pocket. AV Gear Guy has over 30 years of experience with all kinds of media, and they can accept orders from anywhere in the U.S. Don't forget to mention the name of Karen Isn't Always Right and get 5% off. For more details and to book, visit their website at avgearguy.com. That's avgearguy.com. Hey everybody, it's Christopher with Karen Isn't Always Right. My guest today is Heather. Today she takes us through how she got her first job at a theater and worked her way up to being a senior manager at a theater in the Chicago area. Heather is one of the most dedicated people I've ever come to know. Also, I figured if I could convince her to let me marry her best friend, I could convince her to come on the show. I enjoyed our conversation and I hope you do as well. So let's get this going. Here's Heather.
Hey,
How's it going?
it's going. How's it going for you?
I'm doing all right, in these crazy ass times.
Yes, crazy indeed.
Yeah. Well, welcome to Karen Isn't Always Right. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
You bet. Why don't you tell everybody how we know each other?
Yeah, so you are the husband of my best friend.
Yay. Very honored.
Yay! I met Ashley when I worked at the movie theater, and we had become close. And then obviously, girl meets boy, and the rest is history.
Yeah, and we're married because you signed off on it, so I
Oh, of
got
course.
permission.
Had to check all the boxes.
That's right. I appreciate that. Glad I made a good impression.
You did.
So you guys met working in a movie theater. Where did you guys live? Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Illinois.
Okay.
I originally was born in Elgin and then moved out to a little old town called Plainfield.
I know.
So it was a bit of a culture shock. It was all cornfields. So, and I was just entering middle school. So interesting time in my life to have moved.
Yeah.
Also, when I was going to school, sixth grade was still elementary. So I had come out where my seventh grade was my first year of middle school, but not for everyone else.
Same for me. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was interesting. But
So was middle school 7th, 8th, 9th, or just 7 and 8?
6, 7, 8.
6, 7, 8. Okay.
Yeah.
Mine it was just 7, 8. It was kind of weird. And so
Yeah. Well, and I think that's common, which is why it was weird for me. I don't know. I don't know how they do it. Everywhere's different.
Whatever. And then there was junior high, literally right before I mean, I don't know why they changed the name. It's all semantics to me, but whatever. Okay.
Everyone's trying to be unique.
So Plainfield.
Yeah, so was out there doing my thing. And during school, I got really passionate about theater and acting.
Mm-hmm.
I was convinced that that's the direction my life was going. During middle school, I actually went to a school in Chicago for a while for that. So then entered that in college and sort of transferred it career-wise as well. That's how I ended up at the movie theater. Was just trying to kind of mesh those worlds together.
Nice. I also wanted to be an actor. When I got into high school, I had to take an art class, and I'm not artistic. And so I was like, all right, I'll just take acting. Figured it'll be an easy A or whatever. And I was a dork anyway, and got made fun of all the time. I had no self-confidence, and it actually helped me gain some confidence and be able to put myself out there and stuff like that. So I did a bunch of plays. And then I went into college thinking the same thing. It's very political. And it just didn't work out, obviously, acting. So I ended up on the exhibitor side.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy. I don't know. It's so interesting how you see such a clear direction for yourself, and you just never seem to get there.
Right.
You always veer off depending on what door opens.
I think it's hard at that age too to know what the path is.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was just talking to Ashley recently about I've been watching this show on TV called Ballers, and it's about this agent. He's a NFL agent, and like that's something that I thought could have been cool, but I never would have known the path to either becoming an agent or like a GM of a pro football team or anything. I think I could be good at it now, but I had no idea what the path would be. So now it's
Right.
I can't go switching careers at 45 years old. I'll just
Well,
stick to
that's like where I ended up. I never imagined if you would have told me I'd be working in fire protection, that would have been the furthest thing from my mind.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Look at you now.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah. So, so what theater did you have you worked at multiple theaters or multiple companies, or did you stick with one company? Where did you get your start?
Yeah, I was only with one company, and really that was the longest job that I had going for me. I started when I was 16,
Okay.
and then was there, I think, for 8 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then for me, the next step, I was following the natural progression. Became a manager, a senior manager, and the next step for me was to become a general manager.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, it just wasn't something that I wanted to do. It wasn't something I was willing to move for or relocate or anything like that. So it just got to a point where I kind of asked myself, well, what am I doing here if I don't want to take this next step?
Right.
So that's kind of where I veered off in a different direction.
That's the tough part, I think, in this industry is if you want to be a GM, unless you get really, really lucky, you generally, or you have just a ton of theaters for that company in the area, the understanding is you're probably going to need to move.
Right.
And I think I moved I think I moved to 5 different states, before I finally settled where I'm at now. And then I've been relatively lucky here, and then I've been able to be a GM of multiple theaters in the same state. But when you're starting your career, that can be very challenging.
Right.
Because there's only like so many entry level theaters in one area, So was it your first job?
Yep. First job. I had it for about 8 years. And I really enjoyed it though. It really helped build where I'm at today.
Awesome.
I gained a lot of, different skills and just, different experiences that I had there. And I remember, my general manager would challenge me. And at the time, with any manager that you have, it's annoying and, you're always thinking of the negative side of that. But looking back on it now, I see what I've gained from those experiences. So it's nice to know that I was able to take positive out of it and transform, put that in to my work now.
For sure. He might hear this, just so you know.
Hey, I respect him. And
no, I know. It's kind of like growing up and you have those teachers that drive you bananas, but then in retrospect, you look back on your life and those are the ones that had the biggest impact on you.
Exactly.
Or your own parents, it's like, everybody hates their parents when they're teenagers. And just for the record, if he's listening, nobody hates you. But like everybody like thinks they hate their parents when they're teenagers. And then you look back on it, it's like, oh, I get like, my dad like drove me batshit crazy all the time. It's like, cause he was the kind of guy that always let me learn my lessons the hard way, like for real, the hard way. I used to hate him for it. And now I'm like, oh, okay. Now I do the same thing to my kids.
Exactly.
Not maybe extreme, but yeah.
The hard way. That's how you build. If it's always easy, you're not going anywhere. You're on the same level.
You gotta learn those lessons, and if someone's gonna hold your hand every step of the way, I talked about this on one of the other episodes where my first GM, I really did hate him. Like I hated him with a passion because he used to keep us till like 1:00 in the morning. And mind you, I was 15 years old at the time.
Oh my goodness.
Keep us till like 1:00 in the morning and have us like fucking decorating the scullery, moving all this shit around and scrubbing baseboards and stuff. And I mean, I remember like the fury I would have as he's like barking orders at us. And I say he's barking orders, but if I look back on it, he wasn't. He's just trying to he just had standards, and now I'm probably that guy, so yeah. And Ashley's told me stories about the same theater and stuff, and I know he has very high expectations and certain ways of doing things. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's his building, so
right.
I guess get on board.
Or yeah,
or move on.
yeah. I mean, that's where you're working. There's the expectation, and you either want to be there or you don't.
Yeah, you're getting paid, right? It's not like you're
Right.
volunteering. Um, so when you started when you were 16, so how long were you an employee? Like
I only the 2 years. It
2 years?
actually, so while I was 17, my general manager at the time, it was more of we can't wait till you turn 18 so we can promote you.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then the theater that I was actually working for was being closed down. There was a new theater being built across the
Oh, were you
street.
across the street? That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So once that theater opened, I was able to transfer to the new theater, and that's where I was. So
That's right. Okay. So you had two different GMs then, right?
I've actually had one, two, three. I've had three.
Okay. Okay. So I have a theater manager right now at my new location, and she and I were talking the other day, and she told me, she's like, I think she said I've had 13 different GMs.
Oh wow.
And I'm over here like, okay, well, I hope I compare well. I don't know. But we're working in like the absolute strangest time to be working right now because
Right.
obviously we're not operational or anything. So it's like we're just trying to get to know each other in this weird glorified janitorial role. So when you were working as floor staff, is there anything that like jumps out at you as things that you look back on like really fondly, like fun moments you had, like that really kind of kept you working at the theater, made you like it so much?
Yeah, I mean, just aside from the general excitement of new movies, just because I was very fond of theater and movies in general,
Mm.
I think that any place that you're excited or fond to work with is really about the people, because work at the end of the day is work. There's always going to be things that, are challenging about it that you don't enjoy, people hollering at you, cleaning. I mean, if you're working usher, you're sweating and touching Lord knows what in the
Mm.
theater.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think it's really just the people and the bonds that share with them and the experiences that you have. So there was a lot of fun, creative things that we did, and that was just exciting.
So when you say creative, to me, that's a euphemism for, like crazy shit, or were you like a pretty good, by the rules employee?
I walked the line a little bit. I wasn't very big on going crazy beyond it. I'm one of my worst fears is being unemployed.
Yeah, I know.
So if I was, breaking a rule, it was something that I thought I wouldn't be fired over.
I gotcha.
So, but
Yeah, I
yeah,
figured that about you. I figured that you probably like you were the good girl.
yeah.
This is where you and
I,
I are probably vastly different. And just for anybody that's listening, like I'm not like breaking the law or anything, but I don't know, we fuck around a lot, but we still got the work done. I mean, that was kind of my whole thing is like,
mhm.
I think the whole thing about movie theaters, like you hit the nail on the head, like it's always been about the people for me and for pretty much everybody I've talked to about this. That's the common denominator just about every single time is it always comes down to it's great because of the people. I mean, I've made some of my best friends at the theater. I think you have as well. And I mean, I met my wife through the theater, like, but it's also just fun. It's a fun environment. And a lot of it is because of the people, because you're working with different people all the time. There's new blood coming in and, there's always this kind of rotation and cycling of different personalities and things like that I think keep it really, really interesting.
For sure. I used to think about that all the time, especially when I became a manager, just the amount of people that I've worked with and coached and had experiences with. Like, it's a crazy number.
Yeah.
And not everyone goes through that.
Yeah. For real. Like, I mean, I think I have just such a terrible memory and I try to think back to all the people that I've come in contact with over my career, and it's in the thousands. I mean, just the sheer amount of people I've hired and unfortunately also had to fire, is kind of astronomical too. And it's funny because like I'll come across people sometimes that remember me, and I'm like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm sure they used to work for me or something like that. Or Facebook, I get like a Facebook friend request from somebody in the past that I've worked with or whatever. But And it's kind of cool, I think, with social media, to be able to keep in touch a little bit better. Because earlier in my career, like in the late 90s into the early 2000s, like once you moved on, you just moved on and
Yeah.
likely didn't keep in touch with those people anymore. But now with stuff like Facebook and Instagram and all that, it's a little easier to keep in touch if you want.
For sure.
Not
Yeah. Yeah. I
everybody.
get requests sometimes where I'm like, you remember me? Like, we talked for like 2 seconds.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's a little different, I think, when you're in a management position and they might have been an employee, because like for the
Yeah.
most part, you probably remember a lot of your supervisors because there's less of them, but there's more employees. And so it's just kind of easier, I mean, I certainly remember all my region leaders or RVPs or whatever, because there's only been a
For
handful.
sure.
But employees, it's like, no offense, man, but you start blending a little bit, especially when you start going from state to state. And I'll move from one state to another, and then I'll see someone, I'll be like, no, it just looks like somebody from Louisiana or whatever.
Right. That's crazy. Yeah. All those different places. I
Yeah.
can't imagine moving that frequently. Obviously shows, I'm not sure what your situation is, but obviously some passion for that role if you were willing to do that.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I think at the beginning it was a sort of a necessity. It's trying to just get my career jump started. And the easiest way to do it is just to go where they pointed. But man, it was tough. Like I remember, Ashley and I talked about this a lot about you, when you were first looking to move to where you are now. I remember the angst you had about making that decision, and because it's a big, big step.
Terrifying.
Yeah, it's a big step. And you and I are very, very different in that respect, because like, I mean, I moved, I think I was 20 when I moved to Baton Rouge and this is the first time I really moved away from home. And I moved down to that theater to help open that new movie theater for $8.25 an hour. I had zero money in the bank. And in fact, I remember the first time I went to the grocery store, I floated a check just to get groceries.
Oh no.
And then I remember paying my rent late. I mean, it was just crazy. Like I had zero money. And then I did that at the same thing. Like 8 months later, I moved to El Paso. Again, I had no money. And I just like roll the dice, and I was like, I mean, it'll all work out. If I gotta live out of
No,
my
that's like a
car,
terrifying nightmare.
but that's the difference between people sometimes. It's like I've always been the kind of person that I feel like things will just kind of work out. It's easier to, like, when you're younger, I think. As you get a little older, I mean, now I have kids and I'm married and stuff. I couldn't just do that now,
Right.
but back then it was like, I mean, if it all falls apart, I'll just go couch surf, at a friend's house or something like that. But I was also very careless and just free spirit. I was like, and very determined too. I mean, I think to, like, when you start thinking about, because at that age, I didn't have any clue what I wanted to do. And moving to Baton Rouge, that was kind of the first time I made that decision that it's like, okay, I think this is what I want to do. I think this is going to be my career. It seems to kind of be going in the right direction. The GM asked me to come, and so I was like, all right, well, let's do this. And then, when I became a GM, then it starts getting a little bit
Right.
more of a tougher decision of like, okay, is this the right choice? Is that the right place to go? Is that the right theater to take over? Things like that. So
Yeah. And
I
then
didn't mean to make it
when I started, it was just, kind of that job in high school. But as I, was moving up, it was really, it boosted my confidence a lot because, like I said, I was 17 and, they approached me. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be 18 soon, let me apply for that management job.
Right.
They were like, hey, you're doing great, manager.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, let's go.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I went over to my new theater and it was like, hey, you're 3 boxes away from senior. Whoa, cool, let's go.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
was exciting, a great boosting confidence.
Yeah, agreed. I was kind of like you, they asked me, like, I was threading a projector one day. I was finishing up college. I, again, had no idea what I wanted to do. The thought of being a manager really hadn't crossed my mind, and I didn't even really know the process at the time. I mean, I was kind of young and dumb. Like, I just wasn't thinking much back then. I was really kind of more concerned about finishing school and partying. Like, that was just my focus. And then
Right.
I'm like threading a projector and my GM comes up and he's like, hey, do you want to be a manager? And I was like, sure. I guess, I don't know. What do I have to do? But like you said, it was like a big boost of confidence, and I was that manager at the very beginning that, how like when you become a manager and everybody, all the employees are suddenly, especially like ones you were friends with, are like, oh, you're on a power trip or whatever. Maybe you've heard that, maybe you haven't, but I heard that and it was fucking true.
No.
Like I was a dick for a while, because it was just like, you're either going to do it or you're going to not work here anymore, and which is such a terrible leadership style. You learn over the years of how to adapt and how to change that leadership style into being more of a
For sure.
true leader than
Yeah, no, I was definitely the opposite. I was a little more nervous about that and didn't want to come off that way. And, that's challenging. And with the role that I have now, that was actually one of the questions they asked me, how are you going to feel with, with the partners that were your peers?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like at the end of the day, you just need to find that way to do right by both sides. And like you said, with time, you learn where that is.
Yeah. I mean, I've lost track of how many books I've read on the matter, and I still have more to learn, like every time I think I might know everything about this, what I'm doing, I try to read another book about it because I don't, but I think early on I was worried about perception and favoring people. And I was really I think I was very adamant about not trying to be everybody's friend. And I had difficulty kind of finding that balance early on of like, how can you manage to be really being friendly, but not friends as a manager, and, obviously early on with this company, you weren't allowed to be friends with the employees. Now things have changed.
Yeah.
Which I think causes problems. I think on one hand, I think it's probably a good change because I don't have to fire as many people for doing shit that they're not supposed to do. But on the other, because they're going to do it anyway, I think.
Right.
If they want to.
But then it's like, what's the result at the workplace? It was funny because I remember that rule, and I was one of the employees who I hated it. And when I had first become a manager, it would frustrate me to no end.
Mm-hmm.
But now I look at, where I work now, and I wish that was a rule.
Yeah.
Because it's like, how do I want to have a great relationship with everyone I work with, but I don't want to be your friend. I think there's a line. There's a fine line, friends at work and I try to keep that separate. So
yeah, for sure. And I still struggle with it sometimes, like especially at my last location, I got to be very close to my management team, and there's days when I had to put myself in check and remember it's like I'm their boss, like, because you like hear them talking and stuff like that and you want to join in, and you have to remember it's like, nah, they're friends, we're friendly, and I would consider myself friends with them now that I'm not their boss anymore or anything like that. But it's just, I think it's a hard balancing act, and I do think that change in rules can be an issue because I see people who just can't seem to find that balance. It's unfortunate because then it does create problems, and it ultimately creates problems that are even more difficult to solve than had that rule been in place and you can simply just be like, well, you can't work here anymore because I know you're hanging out with them outside of work. Now you have a bigger problem that's more of an HR, like an egregious HR situation, and I just, or there's just that perception from other employees that clearly someone's favoring someone because they're friends, or
exactly
avoiding holding them accountable, or sometimes worse, sometimes they're actually doing favors for employees, and using their quote unquote power to make that kind of stuff happen.
Right. Yeah. No, and that's why I can be unfavorable at times as someone's manager, because I've just to keep out that favoritism aspect, I'm very by the book. If this is what the rule is, it's for all of you. If we can have a great chat on the side, great. If you don't want to be that person with me, that's fine. But try to help eliminate that, and maybe even just that perception.
Yeah, that's the easiest way. I mean, you just said it, is if you're by the book. It's like, it's sort of like lying or not lying. It's like, well, you never have to worry about it if you tell the truth all the time. You never have to worry about what your story is. It's the same thing. If you're by the book with everybody and you're consistent with everybody, you don't have to worry about it. It's like, oh, did I okay, what did I tell that person versus what did I tell this person? And I got to make sure that person doesn't find out that I let them slide on that, or anything like that. And so it's like, look, you're not allowed to drink out of a courtesy cup. I tell that to everybody. You're not allowed to be on your cell phone. That's everybody. It's not like, okay, you're allowed to be on your cell phone, but you can't, or whatever it is, And
Right.
I think that's really important. And I've been criticized for it, but at the end of the day, it's sort of like what we said at the beginning of this, where people might hate you for it for a while, but then when they move on to something else, they realize, oh, okay, well, they just have standards they're enforcing. They just have rules they're enforcing. But unfortunately, I think sometimes those perspectives come too late.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much you've experienced this, but over the years, I've had a lot of employees who they decide to bounce because they're like, fuck this place. You all suck. You guys are terrible managers. No. And then they move on. They go to some other workplace. And then they realize, they're like, oh, you guys are actually pretty understanding. You guys are actually pretty flexible. You guys just had standards and you're just enforcing that. And then they try to come back and it's like, hey, you remember when we told you if you give 2 weeks, we could probably rehire you, but you didn't do that. You bounced and you said some pretty nasty stuff about us. So
Exactly. You got emotional and there you go.
Sorry. Yeah. It's like, don't burn your bridges, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think with the theater too, obviously it's a lot younger of an employee base.
Yeah.
So it's easier to understand why that would happen, but live and learn.
Yeah. Yeah. And, that comes down to as well, and I've talked about this before, the whole idea of, raising young people, it takes a village, like that whole cliche.
Yeah.
We're part of that village. And again, sometimes they learn it just slightly too late because we're the ones teaching them. And it's like, well, I mean, I guess I taught you that lesson for you to go use that lesson somewhere else, which sucks because sometimes you've just seen people that are inherently pretty good, but they just make that mistake.
Oh, it's so rough when I see someone with the potential and know that they have the skills and everything that they need to be successful, and it's just that one thing that maybe an attitude check or just an experience they didn't get, and it's like, if we could just correct that one thing, it'd be like the perfect employee.
Right. I have a tendency to be, I'm a little opposite of what I started as a manager, and so I have a propensity to be a lot more lenient than I ever used to be earlier in my career. And I'm a big believer in giving people second chances, sometimes even third chances, sometimes more than I probably should. Like, this is something that I gain a lot of criticism from like managers for me, because they're like, why are they still here? And sometimes I look back on it, it's like, yeah, I probably should have cut them loose earlier. But I've had more success with giving someone a chance and continuing to try to keep coaching them because I can see in them, I see the potential in them. I can see if we could just turn that part of them around. And I've had success with that.
Yeah.
But there have been those times when it has bit me in the ass and I'm just like, God damn it. And it makes me angry too, because it's like, I just want to like shake that person, be like,
right,
you know how you made me look? Like,
I tried so hard.
Yeah. And I've had people come back and tell me, like, apologize to me. Like, not that long ago, there was this guy, he was an usher, and by his own admission, he was a terrible usher. And we actually never cut him loose, but he was damn close, and he ended up transferring to another location. And we were even up front with that other location. He went out to California, and then I think he was gone for like 1.5 years, 2 years or whatever. And then one day I was like walking out the door out of my building, and he was driving by. He's like, "Hey, Mr. Fry." And I was like, you. And then I remember this thing. And I was like, "Hey, man, how's it going?" And then we caught up for a little bit, and I could clearly tell right away he had matured just over those last, because that's the thing too, is like some of these kids are so young, they're 16 or 17 years old, and it doesn't take very long for them to really grow up. And so just in that 1.5 years or 2 years, like, you could clearly see a huge change in him. So he was like, "Well, hey, I'm coming in. Can we catch up for a minute?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I catch up with him in the lobby, and in like the first 3 minutes, he must have apologized like 4 or 5 times. He's like, "Man, I know you gave me so many chances, and I know I just really didn't appreciate it. And, I was just such a shitty employee." And I was like, "Bro, it's okay." It's okay. But it means a lot. Like, it's like, it's okay, but I really appreciate you saying that,
Right.
It's just nice it's nice when you see them see the light.
For sure. But I think it's good too, to not just let people go at that first, fault.
Yeah.
If you just are constantly having those negative emotions or letting people go, you have that high turnover. Not only are you affected by that one employee, that's going to cause a ripple effect. It's just going to create a bad environment.
Yeah. Well, it can go two ways. It could go both ways though, because keeping someone who's cancerous on has that
Well,
effect as
yeah,
well. And that's the problem that I tend to let myself get into, is that I let somebody stick around that has no business
just a
staying.
little too long.
Yeah. Then that's, when you hear employees being like, fuck you doing, man, letting this person stick around. And you're like, I know, but I also try to be really, really careful about, with performance management, of properly documenting and just making sure that I've done my due diligence, done what I'm supposed to do as far as holding them accountable before I really pull the trigger
Right.
on letting them go, because I certainly don't want to put the company in a bad position. I don't want to put myself in a bad position. And again, it kind of goes back to that balance, I think, of finding where the opportune moment is. So,
For sure.
yeah.
The never ending challenge.
It certainly is. So you became a manager, and as a manager, so the whole point of this podcast usually is really customer service, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
obviously your perception of customer service, or your it's what I'm looking for. Yeah, I guess perception of the customer service situations changes when you go from being an employee to being a manager, right?
For sure.
Yeah, because a little bit as an employee, you can to a degree be like, I mean, it ain't my problem. I mean,
Right.
do
Right.
you want
I'll go
something
grab the
from me?
manager for you.
Right, right. I mean, hopefully not all a lot of employees, at least in my company, are trained to say, well, what can I do for you? I have the power
Right.
to help you. But you know how it is sometimes. It's like you're getting yelled at by someone for something you didn't do, and you're like, I'm happy to go get somebody above me. But now you have become that person that they have to go get. So are there any of those situations that jump out at you that have stuck with you over the years that you encountered?
Oh my goodness.
Probably too many to count.
Yeah, right. I'll tell you, working at the movie theater, it's amazing when I talk to people sometimes. I'll tell them stories and they're like, "But you worked at a movie theater." Like,
Right?
what?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, "Shit, you wouldn't think so." Like all the things
I
that
know.
I've experienced.
Yeah.
I mean, as an employee, I feel like I'm somebody, just my personality type, I like to accept a challenge. I feel good about helping people. So I would definitely, try to do that. But I obviously became a manager too. I mean, like I said, right as I turned 18. So I only had so much experience with customer service,
Mm-hmm.
in those short 2 years that I was working. Which, I mean, it's also during those 2 years, it's not like it was a full work week. So it was limited
Mm-hmm.
experience. But yeah, those customer service is a crazy world. There are so many different sides and views and things that you need to understand or let go or whatnot to survive that life.
Yeah. Have you ever had a customer make you cry?
I will say I've never cried in front of a customer.
Yeah.
I have had people make me cry before, but I, ran away to some stock room or
Cry
storage
room.
room to have the cry room.
I have a friend who runs a theater down in Texas, and he literally has a sign on a door of a stock room that just says "Cry Room."
Oh my gosh. That's hilarious and also really
I
sad.
know. I mean, sometimes I
Yeah,
wish
no.
customers actually knew the impact that they can have on someone. Like I had a girl on here, Alicia. She was on an earlier episode a while back, and she's not the only one I've talked to about this, but the level of anxiety that some of these customers can cause in people is really high. And you just kind of wish, it's like, I just wish you knew this
Right.
impact that your little outburst could have on people.
Right. And for me, it's like those cry moments are when, they make it personal,
Mhm.
so we're away from the situation, we're away from whatever you're upset about or fake upset about or whatever,
Yeah.
but like there are people who have called me racist and, I've had to been walked out by the police before afraid of being attacked,
Yeah.
it's that stuff where it's like, in what world at a movie theater especially, did it have to reach that level?
Mm-hmm. It's
So,
crazy
and it,
how it can escalate. Yeah.
yes, and it gets hard too, because it's like during those situations I have to remember, okay, I'm Heather, the manager at the movie theater. I'm not Heather in the world
Uh-huh.
who would handle the situation in whatever way I see fit
Right.
for me as a person.
Right.
I have to
Right.
think about the company and who I'm representing, and
Yeah. And
so
you need to
I
keep
get
your
really
job and a paycheck.
yes.
Yeah.
Those are the situations that make me want to cry, where it's like I feel like I can't say my piece or stick up for myself,
Yeah.
and you're going to come at me like that,
Yeah.
and I'm limited.
Yes, I do think that's the tough spot that we can be put in, because yes, you have a responsibility as a representative of the company to resolve this issue, regardless of how the guest is acting to a degree. Now, look, I mean, obviously, you only have to withstand so much, but even that degree of what you're supposed to withstand is sometimes a little too much for some people. And it's like you do want to you do have this overwhelming, or at least I do have this overwhelming desire to want to stick up for yourself and be like, hey, don't talk to me like that, ass face. Like, you can't tell
Right.
somebody that, you know.
Exactly.
Because again,
Well, you could, but what happens after that is
exactly. I mean, you could roll the dice, because I have known people who have said similar thing, not that exact thing, but they have said stuff like that, where it's like, fucking talk to me like that, and then the guest will
right.
back down,
Well, I definitely would get to a point where, I mean, if someone was shouting at me or swearing at me, I would say, I can't speak to you if that's how this is going to go.
Yeah.
And if they continue, I straight up walk away. I'm not going to be put in that position. There is a line,
Sure.
nobody deserves that sort of, abuse. And
Right.
I think that the company would back you on that if you were handling it in a professional manner.
Absolutely. Yeah. It just has to be professional. But if you tell
Right.
somebody, don't fucking talk to me like that, and then the
Yeah,
person
no,
does
good
that,
luck.
then yeah, you're going to get in some hot water. But yeah, absolutely. I agree that there is only so much. And then eventually you have to be like, look, I am happy to help you, but you just can't talk to me like that. We can be professional. Yeah. We can calm down, but you know how it is. Like, every time the contact us comes through, it becomes so much less about the actual situation that caused them to be upset, and then it becomes about like, well, you were rude. I was like, no, I wasn't rude. You're screaming at me. I told you to calm down.
Right.
That's not rude. That's just me telling you to, like, relax.
Yeah.
But
and it sucks. It says more about them, and I think that's why we have the Karens, so to speak, in the world. Is it's at the end of the day, it's not about you, it's about them.
Yeah.
They did something wrong, they did something to make themselves look stupid or feel uncomfortable, and they're just on attack mode at that point.
Yeah. And it's sometimes just whatever's going on in their life, and I've talked about this before too, where like, this is why empathy is so important. I think when you're trying to resolve a concern, is that you just don't know what they might be dealing with. And to a degree, it's like, you shouldn't have to care, but here we are. You do,
Mm-hmm.
And so just trying to be a little bit more understanding. I mean, I've even asked, hey, is there something else going on? Like, I want to help. So, but I mean, I'm not somebody's fucking counselor either, right. But at the same time, like, I can try to be empathetic to their life situation, and I've had people tell me, it's like, look, I just found out I'm sick, and I just let things get to me or whatever. It's like, I get it. Okay, well, let's work this out together. Don't yell at me. I'm not going to yell at you, and we can get through this. And I've had people calm once they've calmed down, they've even apologized and be like, dude, I'm sorry, I was being an asshole. It's like, don't worry about it, man. It's cool. Like, I had a guy who, this was a few years ago, he was super, super pissed about our alcohol policy, right? And I don't remember the exact detail of what it was, but once we've denied you service, you're done. Like, even if you're able to produce whatever it was, like if he didn't have his ID, once we've denied you, you're done. Like, we can't override the employee. And so, like, I think this guy was finally able to produce his ID or whatever. And I'm like, look, we still can't serve you. And he was super mad. And I remember we were sitting in my lounge, and he was like basically lecturing me and going on and on and on and on and on. He was being a total dick. And finally got to a point, I was like, you got some time? He goes, yeah, my movie doesn't start for like 40 minutes. I was like, come on. And so, like, we went across the way to Bar Louie, and I just bought him a beer, and we just talked for a minute. And he was like, all right. He was like, this is pretty cool. He's like, I'm sorry I was such a dick. It's like, it's cool, man. I just couldn't serve you there. This is just me.
Right.
Buy you beer. Like, don't worry about it. You just got to remember, And so you can de-escalate a situation, I suppose, be creative, you know?
For sure. Yeah, you got to think outside of the box sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
No.
sometimes people get so stuck on, just employees in general get so stuck on what they can't do. You need to shift the focus to what you can do. Get away from the can't. We're all
Yeah.
there with the can't. We got that.
Yeah.
What can we do?
That's a really good point that you make, because my last boss, that was his whole thing all the time. He was always like, I don't ever want to hear anybody say can't. Don't ever say I can't do that. Just figure out what you can do, even if it's not even related to that. It's like, well, let's go do this. I can go do this or whatever. But just exactly like you just said, stop focusing on the can, which I think is a really, really important thing. But it's so hard to ingrain into younger employees, people who've just started out, that are so caught up in the fairness of things. I think they don't want to feel like they're being taken advantage of or whatever. And it's like, man, you gotta just let that go. Would you rather get yelled at?
Right.
Right.
Well, no, it's challenging because one of the standard responses, that's our policy, but you have to, first of all, you have to accept that when you signed up to work here, you're accepting that policy. You have to stand by it. But at the same time, a policy is not a legal, like, set in stone, whatever. What maybe the customer has a valid point, and you now have something to challenge the policy with, or talk to someone about, why is it there, why does it exist. So it's hard to get away from that. In emotions are running high, and it's like when you get mad and you're like, I'm gonna go talk to someone, and you've got this whole thing planned out, and then you walk in and you say absolutely none of it.
Yep.
that's what those situations are. So it's really just kind of working to slowly train yourself to, for me, because how do you train for that, right? Train yourself to be better in those situations. I think really it's just, I watch every negative experience that my leadership and how they handle it. And it's really just building off of that with who you are and what your style is.
Yeah. 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 And I, as a leader or the leader in any of my buildings, I always try to think about, okay, what example am I setting, for my people? And sometimes I fail, like I make mistakes. And so a lot of times I'll after a bad experience, or if I handle something poorly, especially if people were watching, I'll reflect on it and be like, okay, what must have been their perception of how I handled that? And what could I have done better so that they don't do the same thing that I just fucking did? And I'm really honest and upfront with my people too. Like if there were managers or other employees around when I dealt with something poorly, I'll talk to them about it. And I'll be like, look, obviously I didn't handle that great, and let's talk, I'll literally talk to them about, what do you guys think I could have done differently? What would you
Oh, for sure.
And I don't know, in my mind, that's hopefully a sign of a good leader, is someone who can just kind of be humble about a situation, admit their mistakes, and get feedback from the people that work for them, And I think when they have some buy-in and some impact, then they take it a little bit more seriously, and they're like, oh, wow, I just got to help my own boss, do something better. And then they can take some pride in that too.
Oh, 100%. I always ask my employees, hey, what do you think, or what would you do? I'm not perfect, and everyone has a different experience and a different way of handling things. And that's what's great about, just the world in general, is having all those different personalities.
Yeah, for sure. It's a tough thing to do though, because it's embarrassing sometimes. I'm serious. I've just had those moments where I'm like, oh shit, I just look so bad right there, but it is what it is.
You'll know when I'm stopping myself from that moment, because I just get very quiet. When I'm guarding, I'm just like,
Yep.
I'm like, if I open my mouth right now, I'm gonna get fired.
It's gonna be so bad. Yeah. Yeah. I've been very, very lucky in the sense that, I sometimes when I have really tough customer experiences, if I'm really being laid into, I get a visceral reaction inside, deep inside, and I'll get very, very angry. And I have been so lucky that I've been able to just push it down in the moment, 99.9% of the time I've been able to do that. And then I just unleash it out in the compactor area or whatever after the fact. But man, like if I didn't have more self-control sometimes, we probably wouldn't be sitting here talking right now. So,
I do like internally just start shaking.
Yep.
And again, it's that anger of just not being able to voice, not even always like an outburst. Like there's just certain times, like even if I were to speak calm or professional, there's just certain things you can't say.
Yeah.
And it's hard, but kind of like you said, I just go find the cry room at that point.
Yeah. I mean, like there's just been times when I just want to ask a customer, is like, what's wrong with you right now? Like, why are you having this reaction to, I don't know, your popcorn?
I had this lady once. I will never forget her. I actually think of her every once in a while. She's very present in my mind. But it was at Theater 13, which is our largest theater.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember what movie it was, but it was a kids movie. And it was a sold out, had just opened that weekend show. And I was usher manager that day. And I got the walkie, hey, we need you at Theater 13 right now. Like, this woman's freaking out. So I'm like, all right, getting ready to walk into who knows what. So I thought, I didn't, freaking out, whatever. Parents are usually mad. They can't sit together. No, this woman was freaking out. She was yelling. I don't know that I've ever heard someone yell so loud, yelling at the top of her lungs in this theater. The previews have started. I'm trying to get her out. I can't get her to leave, but I at least got her to the hallway.
Uh-huh.
So I'm like trying to understand what the situation is, because she's yelling.
Yeah.
Her daughter is standing there, and all I could think of was this poor girl. Like, what? So I finally find out what's going on. The handicap seats were taken. She came late, had to go up 4 rows, whatever. She was upset about it. Why is it that every time she comes, she can't get a handicap seat? So I kind of explain our process of seating and, how we try to keep those seats available for people who have a handicap or need it. But that's also challenging because, how do you walk up to someone? You don't know who is and who isn't. Right. So, but, one of the questions I asked her was, who did you talk to? Like, obviously there's a coaching opportunity somewhere for me.
Right.
She didn't talk to nobody. So then she proceeds to yell at me. She's got a metal rod in her back. So she's upset that I didn't know that. And she just keeps going on and on about how I should have known. What do I do at that point? Like, I don't have X-ray vision.
Right.
What the fuck?
I'm not a mind reader. Yeah.
Yeah. So now I'm, back to that whole, well, I can't do this. Let's focus on what I can do. So I'm presenting all of these options for her. No. She goes to sit her 4 rows up wherever she was and proceeds to watch her movie. What the whole point of it was, I don't know. She didn't, I tried to help her. I don't know what she wanted. She wouldn't let me help her and was just mad because I didn't know she had a metal rod in her back.
I wonder if because 4 rows up from the handicap row isn't that big of a different viewing experience.
No, yeah.
So I wonder if walking up the stairs was a problem for her, or that's so strange. It's like, well, maybe if you'd stop screaming, I could better understand.
Yes. And I'm not kidding. I'm talking like screaming, like I've never had such a crazy experience. I was so baffled. Like it was almost kind of a moment of, holy shit, do I need to call 911? Mm-hmm. Like, what is happening? Mm-hmm. And then I finally got the story out of her. So that was rough, because it's like I don't, first of all, don't understand what was the point of that. I tried to help you and then you didn't want it. So what were you trying to gain there?
And that's why she's called a Karen.
Exactly.
Well, hey, we just went through just about an hour.
Oh my goodness.
It flew by, right?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. So, but I feel like there's more to talk about, so we should try to do this again sometime.
Oh, for sure. This is exciting. Thanks for having me.
You bet, man. Thanks for coming on. So, till next time, we'll talk later, okay?
Ooh.
All right. Thanks, Heather.
Thanks.
All right. We'll talk later.
Bye.
That's the podcast, folks. If you're a fan of Karen Isn't Always Right, you can show your support in 2 ways. First, please share with your friends and get them listening. Also, please feel free to donate by going to anchor.fm/Chris-Fry, that's Frey, /support. Please visit KIARpodcast.com, KIAR podcast.com, and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. New episodes are posted weekly on KaiRPodcast.com, Anchor.fm, Spotify, Apple, and pretty much wherever you can listen to a podcast. The views and opinions on this podcast are solely that of the guest and the host and are not representative of any organizations or individuals. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.